Okay, so it is February and this is the month of love. If you watched our Sticks and Halos golf year in review and outlook, we said that we were going to be a little bit more transparent in the new year to come about not only our golf, obviously, but our relationship as well. So the question that we get the majority of the time is, how did we meet? And so I guess from your perspective, how did we meet? What was going on in your life? How old were you? What were your relationships or your life looking like before we met? Because your story is going to be different than mine.
Right.
Yeah, so.
So I was still in Canada. I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I first saw Nick on TV. He was on a reality show called Road to Stardom with Missy Elliott. So I saw him on TV, and I was getting ready to go to work or out or school or something, and my sister was in my room watching the show, and I'd never seen the show. I know she was watching it, but I didn't actually sit down and like watch an episode. And while I was getting ready, I saw Nick on TV, and I was like, "Ooh, this guy's so cute." And my sister was like, "Yeah, he's cute, but he knows it, and he's like dating this girl, and he sucks at the show." And she said all these like things like he was just cocky and all that kind of stuff. And I remember like either thinking this or saying it to my sister, and I was just like, I just think the guy's cute. There's no way I'm ever going to meet this guy. Like, I'm in Canada. He's, in LA or wherever he was from. And I was like, never going to happen. Then about, I don't know, a few months later or something, I'm with a friend of mine, and she's like, "Hey, did you ever watch that show?" And I was like, "No, but I remember that there's a really cute guy on there." And she was like, "Oh, I found him on MySpace." So back then, smartphones did not exist. So we had to like drive to her house and like log on their family computer. And she shows me Nick's profile on MySpace. And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's the guy. Like that's the guy that I thought was really cute." And I asked my friend, I'm like, "Do you care if I add him as a friend?" And she was like, "No, because I don't know him. I just know him from TV." So I go and add him on, I add him as a friend, and that's it. That's all I thought was ever going to happen. And then all of a sudden, he actually messages me. He like slid into my DMs. And he wrote, like, I forgot what he wrote, but at the very end, he gave me his phone number. And I remember thinking, ew, like my sister was totally right. Like, why would he give me his phone number? He doesn't even know who I am. So anyways, I still saved his number in my phone. And like, I don't know, sometime later, I was stuck in traffic driving home from work, and I couldn't find someone to talk to. And I just happened to call him, and it had been probably like some time, and I don't even think I responded back to his DM or message, whatever we called it back then. And so I call him, and I'm like, "Hi, this is Rachel. I don't know if you remember who I am, but you gave me your number on MySpace." And his first response was like, from what I remember, was, "Who?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, my sister's so right. Like, he doesn't even remember who he gave his number to." So anyways, he says, then he's like, "Message me on MySpace so I can see who you are." And so I was like, okay. So I hang up, and I'm driving home, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy just wants to see who I am. And if I look right or whatever, then maybe he'll talk to me. So I was like, forget it, whatever. But then I don't know if I messaged that night or a couple nights later, but eventually I did message him on MySpace, and he messages back, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I do remember you. Like, call me back." So I call him back, and he ends up being the sweetest guy ever, and totally not what my sister thought or what TV portrayed him as. And we talked so much about like relationships, like we talked about his past relationship, where I was at, I guess, in my dating life, which was nothing really. We talked about a lot of spiritual things. I asked him like a bunch of questions about just faith and Jesus and all that kind of stuff. And he was probably the first person that was ever able to give me an answer. Like, I grew up going to Catholic school, and yes, I did religion and I did all that stuff, but I always felt like I didn't have my questions answered. And Nick was the very first person that would bring it back to the Bible and be like, oh, like, this is what this possibly means, this is where it comes from. And if he didn't know an answer, he would always like go back, and then we would discuss it and talk about it. And he was just the first person that I was able to have a very genuine conversation with about spirituality and just religion and all that kind of stuff, because there was always questions I had growing up. But that is kind of what started our bond, really. I mean, that's from my perspective. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, oh man. So where were you at? Like, what was your life about before we met? Like, what were you into? What were you doing? The guys you were meeting, the dates? Because that was, I think, another thing that we kind of had a lot of in-depth conversations about. Because we always say, like, timing was everything with our relationship working out. We obviously, if we would have met a year earlier, we probably wouldn't have been together. If we would have met a year later, we probably wouldn't have been together. And the reason being is because I think if we met a year earlier than we met, neither one of us was ready to be in a committed long-term relationship. And if we would have met a year later, I personally think that probably we would have both been a little bit bitter and just kind of burnt out on the whole dating scene in general. And we probably would have been pretty skeptical of just trusting each other. So I think the timing, you know, God's timing is incredible, but I think the timing was just perfect, and we were both willing to kind of slow down and listen to each other and have these in-depth conversations. I also think the distance made it, you know, like we couldn't just be like, hey, let's go hang out. It was more like those hour upon hour long conversations where you're just really, really getting to know somebody and what they like, and you know, finding, again, asking the in-depth questions that probably skip over when you're just dating and it's a physical thing only. We really got a chance to just
get to know
each other.
Yeah.
But that's my question. Like, where was your life at? What were your dating experiences like beforehand? Because I think there's maybe some young girls out there. I mean, again, you were 22, so
23,
22, I think, because when we met.
Yeah, I think I was 22, so we're
Yeah.
lost. That's where my life was at. I was, so in Canada, legal age up there is 19, so I was able to go to like bars and clubs. I mean, I went at like probably 17, but you're allowed to go when you're 19. So I spent a lot of, I really like to have fun back then. So I spent a lot of time at nightclubs, bars, like hanging out, stuff like that. So I didn't have a lot of boyfriends, but I definitely dated a few guys here and there. And I think by the time I met Nick, I had gone through a few relationships that obviously didn't work out. And I was at that point where I was like, I'm 22 years old. I'm still young, but I'm like reaching that age where I'm soon to be too old to be doing what I was doing. And I just felt like I didn't have a lot of direction. So yeah, I was just really lost. I don't really know what I was looking for. I didn't really know who I was. I was entering a point in my life where, you know, whoever I was as a teenager and all the activities I did as like a young adult was now getting to a point where I was like, you're getting close to the age where it's not cute anymore. so when I met Nick, I think I kind of had no expectations for our relationship. One, because of distance. Like I was in Canada and he was down here. Two, we are 9 years apart. Um, I think that we just didn't have a lot of things in common. Like Nick was married before. He has a son from a previous relationship, and so I guess I just didn't really have any expectations. Like I really kind of thought those like the first few conversations were just literally like, we're going to be friends. Like we're just going to be long distance friends. Like I had no intention of ever visiting LA to come see him, and I had told him that. And I used to always say, like, well, we're friends. Like, we're friends. And he would always just say, well, we're friendly until we sleep together.
Yeah, I did say that. Yeah.
He said that like I would always just be like, yeah, you're my friend. And he's like, no, 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 we're friendly until we sleep together. And I kept thinking, well, that's not going to happen because I'm not going to come down to LA. So I think just where I was at in my life at the time when I met Nick was I was just really appreciative to meet someone who I could just be friends with. I could just talk to him, have deep conversations with him. And because of the distance, there was never any blurred lines about, is this gonna turn romantic? Are we, should it turn romantic? Like we really got to spend a lot of time just getting to know one another, learning about each other, stuff like that. So.
And I think one of the things that you've shared with me when we kind of talk about that period of time in our life was like when you're not trying to impress somebody, when you don't have any expectation of it even turning into a relationship, some of those conversations that we had, you were able to be completely transparent because it was like, if we went down the road of like, oh, have you been promiscuous? Have you drank alcohol? Have you experimented with drugs? Have you done this? It was just like, I can answer these free, like it was no judgment because it's like, I don't even know if we're going to end up together. So whatever you think about me, you're just going to take and go on your way, and I felt the same way. It was just like, this is somebody that I can completely be 100% transparent with because I didn't really know what was going to happen. I just, of course, everything was physical at that point. I knew she was beautiful. I knew that I liked her. I knew the conversation was great. I knew, again, we could be on the phone for 3-4 hours and I wouldn't get bored. But, I just was like, let me just be completely transparent with her. And then that way there is no shock. If something does develop, and it does turn into something, then it's like 5 years from now, if we're together, something can't come up from the past and her be like, oh, wow, I didn't know that about you. So it was just, I think it was good. And I really had never dated like that. I don't know, I'm sorry, but I had never really started off dating like that before with someone.
I mean, no, I don't believe so. I mean, maybe high school, I guess. I don't know. But I mean, even when we first met, I believe you and I were still dating other people. Like I vaguely recall, like I remember coming home and calling you after I went on a date.
Yeah.
And you were like, well, how was your date? And, what, I don't even remember who it was or, but so we really did start off as
friendly.
As friends.
We were friendly.
We were friends.
Yeah, it was. And I, again, I was a DJ working in nightclubs at the time. So I was like, I don't think she had any expectations of, oh, this guy's in California working in nightclubs and he's being faithful or we're in some type of deep relationship right now. I think she was pretty honest with herself. And I was pretty honest about, oh, this is a beautiful girl. I'm sure there's a bunch of guys waiting in line to be with her as well or date her. And so I just was like, that's fine. But it was encouraging that, yeah, after a date, she was calling me. And then after the club, I was calling her. And it was, that's kind of how it started.
Yeah, I mean, so we did talk on the phone first and then eventually went to whatever. We started like chatting online, and he didn't have a webcam. And so I remember one of the first gifts that I gave him was I got him a webcam.
Yeah. Yeah, the days of technology. So this was before iPhones. This was before, I know everybody has an iPhone now, but this was before.
Yeah, it was like a ball that
Yeah.
you placed on top of your monitor.
So yeah, we made it through that. And the only reason why I wanted her to tell her side of the story first is because, I'm one of those people that firmly believe there's three sides to every story. There's obviously her side, there's my side, and then somewhere in between those two, you usually get the truth. And because the story doesn't make me look flattering or good in any stretch of the imagination, but I just know that, again, when you hear some of the other factors that factor in, like for example when she called and I was like, who are you? I mean, she didn't call me back. I mean, she didn't message me back immediately, and then I was actively promoting clubs and DJing clubs at that time. So it was like I had guest lists that I was like, people hit me up like that were trying to get in the clubs and stuff like that. So a random girl calling me was not like I'm trying to be a player. It was just like, usually they were like, hey, I'm coming out to the club tonight. Can you get me in? I don't want to stand in line, blah, blah, blah. And so it's just like, okay. And MySpace was popping back then. MySpace was popping back then. I will tell you, it was a lot going on, from, I'm sure you guys know, if you lived in that era, that time, yeah, there was club flyers, people putting their music up, it was everything. So somebody, hitting you up and saying, hey, do you remember me from MySpace? Was like, yeah, message me so we can be on the same page. At least that's where my life was at the time. So again, should we cut it here? And then if they want to hear more of your story or my story, then they can leave a comment in the message, and then we can let us know if you want to hear more of Rachel's story or if you want to hear my side of the story. But we did this because we did say that we were going to be a little bit more transparent in the month of February and moving forward with our relationship. And hopefully it will inspire some people that are dating now, some couples that are married or have been married for a while. We are going on 18.
I moved here in 06.
We got married in...
So yeah, September will be 19 years that... Yeah, we've probably been together for about 19 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and we've been married for
15 and a half.
15 and a half, almost 16 years. So it can be done. It can be done in this environment. It can be done with social media. I know people are like, social media kills relationships, and
it can be done.
It can be done. And so we want to be not only encouraging when it comes to golf, but we want to be encouraging when it comes to relationships too. So like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to hear more of Rachel's version, then put Rachel in the comments. And if you want to hear my side of the story, Nick's side of the story, then just put Nick in the comments, and we will bring you more of our relationship in the days to come. So thank you for tuning in. Sticks and Halos Golf. See ya.
Bye.